It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is Tuesday, January 14th, 2025, and you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 330 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my bestie, my comrade in gaming commentary, the four-time winner of the Game Awards, Maction. Mac, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, and that's co-award winner of the Game Awards.
I said the Game Awards. We have not won a Game Award. I meant the podcast award.
It's okay. This is 2025, Mr. Nice Guy. We are manifesting the future that we want to have.
That's what happens when you improvise. We're going to make a game and win a Game Award. That's what I was manifesting. Mac, how are you, man? What's new?
I'm doing all right. New, not too frightfully much. Just sort of same old, same old. Lots of interesting and fun and not so fun changes at work that had me just running around like a chicken with my head cut off earlier today. So I feel a bit out of sorts, if I'm being entirely honest. But yeah, I'm glad to be here with you, Mr. Nice Guy. You are my rock, my island in the middle of tumultuous times.
I appreciate that. And I don't know if that's a compliment or not, because sometimes islands in the middle of tumultuous times result in people being lost for 10 years from their loved ones, like the show Lost. There have been many a show where people crash on an island. What's that one with Tom Cruise? Or not Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks.
Oh, Castaway.
Castaway. So I don't know. Islands, fun if they're tropical, but during tumultuous times, sometimes not so fun. I'm overanalyzing. Mac, things are good on my end. I'm just always such an optimist. So literally nothing spectacular has happened this week, other than the fact that my son's basketball team on Saturday, down 8 points with 4 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, managed to chip away at the score, come back to win it on a last-second shot that sent it to overtime, and then win by 4 in OT. And I caught that shot on video, and it was the coolest sports moment I have ever witnessed in person. Crowd was going wild. It was like watching a Disney movie. It was unreal. I'll have to send you the clip.
Oh my gosh, man, I can't wait. You know me, I'm a sports ball expert, but there's nothing like seeing the sports ball happening to somebody I care about for me to really get invested.
Yeah, it was pretty dope, man. So, other than that, just the usual, man. Not a lot of new stuff to share. Unless you have something new to share, I guess we kind of cut the small talk and we hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Let's do it, Mr. Nice Guy. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to get together and talk about gaming news. I mean, first there was the Indie Game of the Year episode for all those indies we got to play in 2024. And then there was the Game of the Year episode that we recorded last week with Spennis the Menace. I mean, I've been waiting for my gaming news. Mr. Nice Guy, what's new in Vidya Gaming?
Dude, there's so much, and there's a few stories that are very, very top of mind, but we may not dive into those immediately. Once again, thank you for tuning in to episode 330, those of you that are here live, and those of you that are downloading and listening after the fact on your commute, or using us as, what's that stuff, ASMR?
Yeah.
That helps you go to sleep. Yeah, if you're using us for that, we do have silky smooth voices and high-quality mics, so thank you. Mac, our first news story this week comes from IGN.com, written by Ryan Dinsdale. And here is what Ryan writes. Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima is questioning how long he can remain creative while revealing the Death Stranding 2 On the Beach is in a crunch time. A series of Twitter posts from Kojima revealed his thoughts on both subjects, as he first revealed he was tired before detailing the most demanding period of game development, known as crunch time. Game studios have generally vowed to avoid crunch, where employees have to work extended hours and even on days off for prolonged periods, following a series of high-profile controversies in recent years. It goes on to say, quote, the most demanding period of game development, both physically and mentally, commonly known as crunch time. On top of mixing and Japanese voice recording, there's an inevitable pile of other tasks, writing comments, explanations, essays, interviews, discussions, and non-game related work. It's incredibly tough, end quote. That was Kojima speaking. It does say here that he failed to mention Death Stranding 2 specifically, but the assumption is made that that's the game he's referring to since it comes out this year. Mac, we don't need to have a debate about crunch. I think that we probably have similar views. But my question for you is twofold. Number one, because Kojima is so beloved in the industry, right? Metal Gear Solid, Death Stranding. And because many people felt like he was done wrong by his previous employer, like they let him go and they continued to make Metal Gears without him and blah, blah, blah. Do you feel like he's going to get a pass for participating in crunch for Death Stranding 2?
I mean,
and does he deserve one?
Does he deserve one? So, I mean, look, I feel like, okay, way back in the day, right? I used to see this like a cartoon or whatever, like you would see in the style of like the Sunday newspapers or whatever. And I seem to recall it was in like a business class that I had. And it was near the door, and it's always stuck with me. And left frame, it was like this is gonna kill me. But it was
apparently you don't remember it that well.
I'm trying.
I'll never forget this. Oh wait, what did it say? I'm just teasing you. Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember the exact wording because on the one side it said manager, and on the other side it said leader. And on the one that side that said manager, it had somebody sitting on top of like a cartload of stuff.
Okay.
And he was just pointing at the people in front saying, I think he was saying like pull or something like that, but he was issuing orders atop his chair on the weight that everybody else was carrying.
Sure.
And in the other one, in the leader side of things, it's the same person, but they're at the very front, pulling. And so, obviously, the take-home was, it's just like, if you're just going to tell people what to do, you're not really a leader, because that's not what leaders make, and what makes leaders. This, I think, is somewhat topical, because I think we can have a lot of forgiveness for people who are in there actually doing the effort and putting in the time, and they're not expecting people to do things that they are not willing to do themselves, but also they aren't asking for things that they aren't actively doing themselves.
Right.
So I don't know if he's going to get a pass. I don't know if he should get a pass, but like if you told me that Kojima was there putting in the time, putting out the hours, that there was nobody who was working as hard on the project as him, that he never asked anybody to work harder than him, I'd have a lot more forgiveness in my heart for some crunchiness, even though I don't care much. And maybe it's just the persona that Kojima has dedicated, but like, he strikes me as the type of person who's doing the work, not the person who's just telling other people to do it.
Yeah, and here's my thing. I think that crunch, because, for good reason, has gotten such a negative connotation. Because it's forced workers at all levels to put in these types of hours. And it's one thing to be that leader who is there delegating the work. And it's another person to be a voice actor who's recording the 100th take of the day. Or to be a graphic designer, or maybe a troubleshooter is a better example, who's trying to find that one line of code that was typed in incorrectly and pulling their hair out while trying to do so and missing their kid's birthday, right? There's different jobs, but they all seem to require a similar level of crunch, when some jobs are more challenging than others. Now, the reason that I think crunch has a negative connotation is simply because of testimonials that we've received from employees in the past, where they've gone to publications and said, hey, I didn't sign up for this. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do this, right?
Yeah.
And this really applies in any workplace. There are going to be some people who are just more invested in accomplishing a task than others. And it's at all levels. I think that crunch is not always a bad thing. And hear me out. If you have a team of people and all of them are invested in achieving this task, and they all say, you know what, everybody put your hand in the circle. We're going to do a team cheer, and we're going to work hard, and we're going to achieve something great. We're going to put out The Last of Us, right? And it's going to be phenomenal. We're going to put out a new IP, and it's going to take the gaming world by storm, and we're all going to get residuals, and we're all going to be able to put this on our resumes, and it's going to be life-changing. In that scenario, I think that crunch could be a good thing. Where I think it gets sketchy is when it's almost involuntary, or when it becomes obligatory, and it forces people to miss out on life events and not get sufficient sleep and mental health and things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely the worst case scenario of any of this sort of thing. Now, Mr. Nice Guy, there's something that that you mentioned. You said residuals. Do we? It's my understanding that most people involved in video games are, strictly speaking, contract work, one and done. But
fair.
Yeah. So, which is something that we've kind of talked about vaguely several times in the past, that it would probably be a much more equitable thing. And I think in previous discussions about crunch, we've said, like, we would look more favorably on crunch time if we thought that, or if we were aware of video game developers or people involved were getting residuals for their work. But yeah,
and that's a good point, and that was why I used the example also of, we're going to be able to put this on our resume.
Sure.
And we're going to be able to say and get credit for the fact that I worked on X task at X studio and put out X game that sold 1 million, 2 million, 10 million copies, and it's going to further my career. That's going to make this crunch worth it to me. But if people feel like they're not getting the career growth or the financial compensation to make up for the crunch, that's where I think it gets sketchy.
Sure.
And you can always quit. That's what people would say. You can always quit. But there is a certain level of peer pressure, I think, that comes into play in these scenarios.
Sure. Also, I don't know if I'm just getting old and cynical, but I've found the you can always quit to be significantly less, especially if your expertise is in making video games, and we've just come off of years of layoffs upon layoffs upon layoffs. You know, I think the reality is you could always quit just seems like, well, lift yourself by the bootstraps that you don't actually have.
I was reading an article today, not to get too off topic, about a big financial company that's having people go back to work full time, or rather in office 5 days a week. And the CEO said something to the effect of, I understand why people wouldn't want to drive into work 5 days a week. I also understand that they could choose to not work here. And I'm very much paraphrasing, but that was effectively his vibe, and he's entitled to that. But I think that it's a different scenario when it comes to crunch. Like, you could just quit, you're right. That's way easier to say as an alternative than it is to actually implement. And that's just how I feel about it. So hopefully Kojima is treating his people well.
Yeah.
And hopefully when he says crunch, maybe he didn't mean the technical term that we're all familiar with.
Sure, maybe he meant light crunch.
Maybe he meant Nestle Crunch. I don't know. But I do know, Mac, that there's another big news story that we should definitely talk about today. This is on Kotaku.com, written by Ethan Gack. Here's what Ethan writes, or what Ethan wrote. We finally made it, folks. The Switch 2 reveal is just days away. At least that's what insiders are now claiming, and it's about time. Podcaster Nate the Hate, who has a long track record of sharing credible industry leaks, said the long-awaited announcement of Nintendo's successor to the Switch will happen on January 16th. I can share with you right now that the Nintendo Switch 2 will be revealed in the coming week, he said on the latest episode of his show. I have been told the Switch 2 will be revealed Thursday, January 16th. Mac, that's just 2 days away. Nate the Hate said he's heard the reveal will focus almost exclusively on the console itself, with no real focus on what software will run on the Switch 2. So rather than get a look at the Switch 2 and say a new 3D Mario game, Nintendo is planning only to share information on the hardware itself. Mac, you've played the Switch. You are not a Switch owner, but you've put in a good amount of time. I believe you've played through Breath of the Wild. I assume you've probably played it docked. You've probably played it undocked. Here in the Nice Guy household, we have the Switch OLED and we have the OG Switch, and we've gotten a good amount of time in with the Switch. So my question for you, Mac, is if there was to be one improvement, maybe even two improvements to the Switch, what would they be? That could be form factor, that could be quality of life, that could be battery life, it could be whatever you want. What would your improvement to the Switch 2 be?
So for all the hate, I have to admit they did a wonderful job with the Switch. The aesthetic, the vibe, the sizing. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't work for everybody's hands, but, it worked reasonably well for mine. I can't find really any faults with the product itself. The only thing that I would say, the one improvement, is I would love for it to be a little bit lighter, and I would love for it to have longer battery life, and I don't think that those are necessarily... They kind of seem mutually exclusive, to have more battery and also lighter.
Well, no, because, that's often the route we go. Like, think about the Steam Deck OLED, which I don't have. It's a little bit lighter, and it does have a longer battery life. So to your point, that is possible.
Well, and that's what I would hope from the Switch 2. I'm the type of person who likes pixel art and things like that, so hyper fidelity in my graphics is not the type of thing that is very front of mind for me. That's what I would say for improvement. Mr. Nice Guy, did you have an improvement that you would like? And seeing as how the Nice household is using it so much, what would you guys see changed?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Using the Switch in handheld mode, I think it's actually pretty close to perfect. I like the OLED screen. I think it's a good fit. I have some thoughts on the Joy-Cons, but I'll kind of leave that alone. If there were two things I could change about the Switch, one would be hardware-based, one would be software. Hardware, I'd want 4K. It's silly to think that we're at a stage where Nintendo is putting out a console that isn't 4K.
So, real quick, when you say 4K, do you mean 4K in your hands or 4K docked?
No,
okay,
just
cool.
docked. Just docked. Yeah, the size of the screen in 4K handheld isn't going to be significant enough to make a difference. But docked mode, absolutely. Mario Kart 9, if that's really coming, 4K, absolutely.
So
want that.
To your thing, I don't know how feasible this is, but back in the earlier days of laptops, we used to have laptops that had additional graphics cards in their docking stations, so you could plug it in, put it down, and have it run in a much more, graphically intensive mode if you needed that sort of things. And I think the technology has existed in the past. I don't know why it couldn't exist now for maybe Nintendo docking stations, Switch 2 docking stations to give you the 4K. That would be very cool.
Yeah, there's no reason it couldn't exist, and I think that they will do it. The other thing I would say is a software thing, and this is something that I have wanted for a long, long time, which is for Nintendo to improve their online. And I'm not talking about the games that they give us access to where you have Switch Online and you can play GoldenEye, and old Game Boy games that you could never have possibly found another way to play through ROMs or anything like that. Come on, Nintendo.
You're talking about the ability to squad up, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm talking about the ability to squad up, and not just with those old school games, right? I get that it might not really be a feasible use of their time or a productive use of their time or feasibly financially responsible to make it so that I can play GoldenEye 64 online. Adding that functionality doesn't make sense. However, make the Switch a place where I want to meet up with my friends and where I want to play. Yes, kids play, but allow some voice chat. Give me some type of trophy system so that I get achievements as I do certain things in the games, so that I can have a score from generation to generation to generation, and it makes the Switch a place that I want to be. Give me a much better friends list and much better ways to connect online together, to play Super Smash Brothers, to play Mario Kart, to play the other multiplayer games that you're coming out with. Those are the two things I want from the Switch 2. And I'll say this lastly, when you wait this long to say when you're going to announce your console, it's going to get leaked. So I don't really feel bad for them for that. Mac, anything else on the Switch before we might even just move on? We had another news story, but I think we're probably set. What do you think?
I think the hardware pretty good. I liked what they did with the system, and here's to hoping that the wizards at Nintendo make the Switch 2 even better.
Last news story for the super Pokemon nerds out there, like our good friend Spennis. This is gaming adjacent. Pokemon trading card game is dealing with a lot of scalpers. This is by John Walker on Kotaku, and effectively he wrote an article about how these new sets are selling out ridiculously fast, like within minutes, due to the scalpers, and that if they're not able to find a way to stop this, that it's going to ruin the game. Mac, did you ever play Pokemon trading card game growing up back in the day? Did you collect the cards? Did you have any of the cards that friends gave you that you won? Was it your thing?
I had one or two cards that people had given me. I believe at the premiere of the Pokemon movie, that they were giving out these little not quite Mew trading cards at the premiere, and so I had one of those. Barring that, there was a period of time where I think it was Burger King or maybe it was McDonald's, and they had little Pokeballs that had gold cards or gold colored cards inside of the Pokeball for Mewtwo and several other things. But that's as close as I got to collecting the cards.
I don't think that people today really, and Pokemon is still very popular. Like, the longevity of Pokemon is almost like Jay-Z, like in terms of how long it's been around. Like, if I was comparing Pokemon to a rapper, it would probably be Jay-Z. Because it's like, it came out and it was super popular. It's maintained, and it's even continued to get new fan bases as it's gone on. I had a lot of Pokemon cards as a kid. I don't have time or energy or desire to get into collecting them again. But it's frustrating to see how something went from just being a cool thing that we could all be into and get a few cards to now it's something that people are scalping online and purchasing not for the love, but simply for the profit. Like, opening Pokemon packs back in the day on the occasion that I would get one was an awesome feeling. And I want kids to be able to feel that. So stop scalping stuff.
Yeah, scalpers, think of the children.
Think of the children. That's been our news for the week.
Well, now we turn to some video game history. Things that happened. Big deals in video gaming in this last week, in years before. There are a couple to note. Let's see, the release of Adventure on the Apple II PC, back in 1981. The launch of Battle.net from Blizzard back in 96. Or maybe the release of Resident Evil 4 for the GameCube in 2005. But I've got a slightly different tack to take, and I hope you'll forgive me, both you, Mr. Nice Guy, as well as everybody who's listening afterwards, because this is going to get a little bit maybe heavy. It's really about people trying to sane wash stuff.
What does that mean?
Well, you've heard of like whitewashing something, right?
Of course, yes.
Sane washing is like trying to pretend in that same way, trying to, be like, oh, this is fine, but be like, oh, this is normal. Sane wash, oh, this is normal, this is fine.
Okay.
Great example. I feel like this with respect to video games, right? You and I, Mr. Nice Guy, we say, hey, a video game shouldn't really ever have to be destroyed or expire or go away or stop functioning, right? But like, Nice Guy, we say that to people, and like, I feel like over the past decade, people have done a really good job of sane washing the idea that a company can't possibly be bothered to keep a server running or to allow the game to be played after they turn off their servers. I feel like I'm out $80. That sounds to me like theft. But people are like, oh, well, they have to be able to do this, or else how would anybody ever make video games? How did we ever have 40 years of video games when people couldn't do it? That's what I mean. Sane washing.
Right.
So, this actually is going to be a little bit about the early 90s and video games, the arcade, and the FBI, believe it or not, Mr. Nice Guy.
Interesting. Let's hear it.
So, throw your mind back, Mr. Nice Guy. It's 1989, right? You're in the arcade, you're a young man, you're putting those quarters in to an arcade game.
I'm there.
And what is the first thing that you see that comes up on the screen?
As I put a quarter in the game?
Yeah.
The opportunity, there's a lot of things. The opportunity to add a second player.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity to add another quarter. I don't know what you're looking for here.
No worries. What I'm looking for is something so wild and crazy. Almost every video game in the arcade from January 10th, 1989, had a splash screen that said, "Winners don't use drugs."
Oh, sure. I do remember that.
Had the seal of the FBI and said, "Winners don't use drugs. William S. Sessions, Director, FBI."
Yeah.
And that all
it.
got started January 10th, 1989, because as we all know, you go to the arcade to win. High scores beat the game, and you're a winner, right? And winners don't do drugs. What brilliant targeted advertisement. I'm sure nobody did drugs ever again because of that.
Yeah, especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, once again, I'm not a drug user. I can guarantee that there were people who went to the arcade specifically to experience that. Like, just keeping it real. I wasn't one of them, but I'm just keeping it real. Like, I guarantee that happened.
Sure. Today, we celebrate that amazing moment in video game history. Arcades really started to sort of have a decline in the late 90s and the early 2000s as we had game consoles and things like that getting more and more powerful, taking those, that role. So for a lot of us, Winners Don't Use Drugs, that program that started back in 89, this last week, was a whole component of the arcade experience.
I like you sharing that story. Yeah, great story.
Well, there's also some more story to it, Mr. Nice Guy. Some interestingness. And I'll try to be quick because Sessions, this William S. Sessions, director of the FBI, his story ends in 1993, kind of middle of the year, when Sessions was fired for misuse of government property, government funds, and other ethics abuses. And I actually wanted to explain this a little bit more. It ties back to this whole sane washing thing, and it's rather on point in relation to current events. The FBI gets founded back in the, early 19th, I think it's like 1908 or whatever. And around the time of Watergate, which happened back in the 70s, there were concerns that the FBI had not really been so much executing the law, investigating people, but really just kind of being bagmen for the president of the U.S. And while they were still, and that prompted movements in the 1970s to insulate federal law enforcement from the direct influence of the President of the United States. While they were still an executive branch of the US government, there needed to be some distance. In the case of the Attorney Generals, their policy was to never have direct meetings with the White House. In the FBI, this was actually changed by an act of Congress, by the way, was that in the FBI, it meant that you only picked the FBI head when there was a resignation or after they had served their 10-year terms. While in theory, you could fire an FBI director in the same way that there's no rules that say that a dog can't play basketball, it just wasn't done. You weren't supposed to, as evidenced by the fact that there had never been an FBI director fired in the history of the FBI. Until we get to Sessions. So he gets appointed by Ronald Reagan in 87, and at the end of the George H. Bush administration, there was an investigation and a report of Sessions' unethical behavior while he was head of the FBI. The report gets finished just as George H. Bush is leaving and Bill Clinton is coming in. And Clinton says, "Hey, buddy, this is pretty bad. You should resign." And Sessions says, "No, I'm not resigning. You're going to have to fire me." Nobody's ever fired an FBI director. So Clinton did fire him. And he was the first FBI director to ever be fired. It was a big deal. It was kind of wild. We flash forward, of course, and this led me down this rabbit hole. James Comey, right? He was an FBI director who was the second person to ever be fired in the 100-year history of the FBI, from the directorship, that is to say. But Comey, I didn't realize this, was so well liked that Congress, remember, you serve a 10-year thing, Congress passed an extension of his term to give him a full 20 years. They gave him a second 10 years. It required, even though he's an executive branch official, required an act of Congress to give him more time. And he was 14 years into his 20-year term when he was fired by a tweet. Obviously, we remember that. And then Chris Wray, who was appointed in 2018 to replace James Comey, was recently told he needs to resign or they're going to fire him next Monday.
Okay.
6 years into his 10-year term. So I just want to throw this out there that firing FBI's directors isn't normal. It's only happened literally twice in the 100-year history. But the first one was the video game FBI director, who gave us that winners don't use drugs. So anyway, don't engage in the sane washing as ridiculous. That's a little bit political, a little bit heavy, but that's video game history.
Mac's opinions do not necessarily represent the opinions of two nerds in a pod, but he is half of the pod, so
It's
maybe
true.
they do.
He is half of the pod. And he's got facts.
And next, guess what? It's time for
The topic of the week?
the topic of the week, a segment
Woo!
where we talk about something relevant in gaming and give our opinions on it. And this week, if you've been anywhere but under a rock, you probably know that Rolling Stone put out a list of the top 50 video games of all time. Now, we are not going to go through the full list, but we are going to discuss it. Now, Mac, I know I sent this to you in advance. Did you get to take a look at it?
I did. And there were some things that I thought should have been higher on the list, some that I thought were pretty good picks.
Nice. Before we dive in, I want to read just a blurb of the criteria that they used so that we have some context here.
Yes, please.
And then we can maybe talk about like games that we thought should have been there that weren't, games that we felt like were kind of out of place, and spend a few minutes. So, won't read the whole thing, but they say for this list, we looked at both how influential each game was at arrival, as well as whether it still holds up. A good game may have played well, but a great one still does. These are games that made the culture what it is today and will chart where it goes tomorrow. So we're looking at influence and we're looking at longevity.
Love the subjective criterias.
Right? Yeah, it is very subjective, and you have to be when
You
you're coming
do.
up with a list of 50 pieces of media over decades and decades, right? You
Yeah.
can't get them all in there. Mac, any initial thoughts as you looked at this list?
So, yeah, like I said, there are a couple that I thought I would have liked to have seen a bit higher on the list. A few that I would have liked to have seen a little bit lower because I didn't think they were quite as impactful to games itself. But, you know, for the most part, I could agree with a lot of the stuff on there.
So let's take a different route then. Were there any like glaring omissions in your opinion? And we can look at some of the top 5 while you think about that, because I thought there were some. Just to give some context real quick, we'll go through the top 5 or 10 maybe. Number 1 was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild from 2017. Number 2 was Tetris 1989. Can't argue that Tetris doesn't hold up or that it wasn't very influential.
Yeah.
Number 3, Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 4, Super Mario World. Number 5, The Last of Us. Number 6, Half-Life 2. Number 7, Metal Gear Solid 1998. Final Fantasy 7 from 1997 was number 8. Elder Scrolls Skyrim was number 9. And number 10 was Super Metroid.
So, on the subject of Final Fantasy VII, I know I'm very much in the minority, but this is one of the ones that I thought should have been much lower on the list because, while I do think that Final Fantasy VII has some good things about it, I don't think it was the best Final Fantasy story. I don't think it did the best Final Fantasy. It wasn't the best Final Fantasy game. I think it really just benefited from being like, you know, the first 3D Final Fantasy, the polygons. I mean, again, I know I'm one of a select few, but I think Final Fantasy VIII did the formula much better than 7 did, and I will die on that hill. I'm not saying that 8 deserved to be in the top 10, but I thought 7 should have been lower.
The thing that makes me scratch my head is they talk about how well it holds up.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Well, and that's the thing is they have it listed here. They have 1997 in parentheses, and then they say Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, PlayStation 4, Xbox One. I mean, Which version are we talking about?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Well, ostensibly, we're talking about the 1990s version, the one they specifically call out, which does not hold up that well.
it doesn't. And I think there was an editor's note that said, like, the systems listed are the ones it was on at the time, but then they listed others as well. Mac, I thought there were some glaring omissions from this list, and I'll share just a couple.
Please, yeah. I mean, obviously, Mega Man, right? You know, that's the
Yeah.
number one on your list, Mega Man.
It's not number one, but I don't think there's a Mega Man game on this list. No one can argue the influence there of Mega Man and say it wasn't influential.
Thank you.
I would say when I think of best games I've ever played, I would say there should be a Portal game on this list.
Agreed.
Probably Portal 2, I think, was the better, although Portal was more influential and really got the thing started. Mario World was the only Mario game, I believe, outside of like Mario Kart, that made this list. And I mean, I would have liked to have seen Mario 1. You know, it holds up, and I think it was more influential to video games as a medium than Mario World.
Yeah.
Mario Odyssey was a fantastic game. That probably could have been on there above Mario World. I don't know. And I'm biased towards Mario 3. I don't think those are all omissions. I just think we could argue that any of those would be above Mario World, in my opinion. I would say if we're talking about influence, I would say Among Us should probably be on the list. That's a game that had a lot of influence in terms of playing both mobile and like docked or on your TV with friends. And then you're going to laugh at this one, Mac, but I feel like Half-Life Alyx, objectively one of the best. Now, when we're talking about influence, okay, fine. But anyone who has played that game truly understands its influence and its greatness.
I feel like one of the more influential games was actually something like, call me crazy, but like Bejeweled.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Or some of those very casual mobile experiences that wound up being literally on almost everybody's phone at the time. We all had that, and I think in a lot of ways, games like that, I'd even go with you on like a Farmville. Just these things very much introduced people who would not otherwise be video gamers. I believe the list included like Wii Sports on it.
It did. Yeah, it did.
Oh, this, told a bunch of people it was okay to be gamers. And it's just like, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think what did more for just telling people that, hey, it's okay to be a gamer were experiences like Farmville, experiences like Bejeweled, stuff like that. That's where I felt there was definitely a glaring omission in it.
Yeah, I was glad to see that there were some sports games on the list. Whether or not that's your thing, I do think that they play a huge role in the history of gaming, and they're super influential. The thing that I didn't get is that they listed specific years of sports games. So, for example, the 18th game on this list is Madden NFL 2004. Which I think is ridiculous. Just put the franchise on there. Just put Madden. Just say that Madden is very influential, because candidly, there's no way that Madden 2004 still holds up. You're being ridiculous if you think that it does. The 20-year-old game, number one, the rosters are going to be old. Number two, the graphics are going to be ridiculous. And then they also had NBA 2K11 on here at number 30.
As a 2K connoisseur, was 11 the most influential of the series?
No, I mean, you could argue that it was kind of a turning point where it blew up even more, but I don't think that it was such a better game than the year before, that it was the one that deserved it. I mean, Mac, I'm looking at this list. We literally have Madden NFL 2004 at 18, and then we have Baldur's Gate 3 at 19, which I think that's silliness. Not to be hacky and just bash their list, they actually did a decent job of getting some representation in here. And I think it's clear that unofficially they wanted to put maybe one title from each franchise here, right? Like they didn't want 10 Mario games on here.
Yeah.
Or 10 Zeldas or 10 Call of Duties. They wanted to just have representation from those IPs and then move on.
And yes, to be fair, we are highlighting some things that we thought could be better, but it's a pretty solid list as far as 50s. Just little things here or there.
Yeah, they got Hollow Knight, which made me happy. They have some Uncharted on here. They had Celeste on here.
They did. That is a sign of good taste.
I got to ask you this, and then we can wrap this segment. Any indie games? Minecraft is on here at 28. Are there any indie games that come to your mind that you would say, you know what? I wish that would have made a top 50.
Yeah, both Thomas Was Alone as well as Return of the Obra Dinn. Those are among the games that I will recommend to anybody because I think they elevate the form really in its artistry. And, you may not think it at first blush, but they are fantastic games.
So one other that I have written down, and when I was in college, I remember being in my dorm when I was in an apartment actually, and playing this on Friday nights with friends and having people come over, and that was Guitar Hero or Rock Band. I just can't believe that they don't think that had a level of influence that would make at least one of those games get on.
Yeah.
Those were fun. Well, hey, let us know in the comments or tweet at us, email us, what games do you think should have been on this list that weren't? And that's been our topic of the week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. The link is in the chat. Mr. Nice Guy is already looking at it, and there's a reason why this is on Mac's radar. In a move that will surprise nobody who's ever heard this show, or otherwise familiar with me at all. This is hand-drawn game guides, Mega Man. So the short version is that some years back, there was this guy who put together these beautiful hand-drawn game guides, and they were meant to be for a variety of IPs, Castlevania, mostly focused on the older retro things. But even though he did a Kickstarter, he didn't have the okay from those companies to make a hand-drawn game guide, and it seemed like he was a bit worried about, getting sued for the stuff. I don't know. I think his work was definitely transformative enough, but, when you're facing down the thought of lawsuits from a big video game company, you do things to sort of protect yourself, understandably so. Well, anyway, Capcom, as we know, has always been really, really cool about fans. Like, let's say you make a bit of, Resident Evil 2, but inside of an engine that kind of looks like Resident Evil 4, and you do it in the Unreal Game Engine, and it looks awesome, and people think it's great, and Capcom says, hey, we got to shut your fan project down, but can we employ you to make this game with us? Capcom does that kinds of things. So, in that vein, this first hand-drawn game guide is being done for the original Mega Man and for the Mega Man 1 on the Game Boy. It's being put together here. If you, the goal was basically 20,000. That's already been smashed. They're at almost triple that now. And it's only been up for, I think, a day so far. If you wanted a digital version of this, $19. If you wanted a physical hardcover, $29. If you want them both, that's $39. And then, of course, there's more options with things added on. It's supposed to be delivered August of this year for the physical. The digital also bears a August 25, and you can scroll down. I know this is an audio medium, and this is very much a visual thing, but you can have a little scroll through and see the things. The only way that this could be cooler for me, Mr. Nice Guy, is if it was about Mega Man 2, and who knows, maybe he'll do one for the second installment, and maybe even some Mega Man X games as well, is one of the things that he's hinting at. So yeah, Mr. Nice Guy, I think we know where I'm landing on this, but as you've had a chance to look over it, any thoughts?
You know what? This is not for me, but I love physical media and I love what this guy is doing. This is very much a nostalgia thing, and it's a conversation piece. You put it on your coffee table, you put it on your desk or on your shelf, and people come over and you're like, oh, hey, I got this cool thing and I'm passionate about this game. And check it out. Because the reality is, Mac, no one really needs a guide.
Yeah.
for any of these games, right? We have YouTube, we have our memories. There's so many ways to play through these games, but it brings us back to a time when we did need a guide, when you used a Nintendo Power, or in the early days of the internet, you'd print off some instructions on how to get through a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is cool. I also think that it's still very relevant, and that there's literally game sites where people are putting together guides for more complicated, more modern games. So this is cool. I like what he's doing. So I think that the pricing structure is a little bit silly. Like, I mean, obviously it's priced to encourage people to buy the physical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why would you pay $20 for the digital and not just pay the extra $10 and get it? But I also don't understand why you would need both. That's kind of funny to me.
Okay. Now hang on. Let's not say things we can't come back from.
Mac, you buy the physical,
Uh-huh.
and then you scan it or you take pictures, and boom, you've got a digital. I think that's silly. You know, to say you want both of them. All right, well, it's more than just buying the physical. I think that's absurd.
Well, while I would say that I would not mind if the digital came along with the tier of the physical, that would be nice. But I probably have already backed it at both. So yeah.
Oh, I insulted you without knowing.
No, it's okay.
The bottom line is that I would say kickstart this.
Yeah.
I think this is cool.
And I did say kickstart, and we wish everybody the best. But yeah, I want to see more of these. And Mr. Nice Guy, who knows? Maybe one of these days I'll turn up with one of these for Mega Man X, just for you, my dude.
The best Mega Man game of all time.
It is very good.
Well, cool. Now it's time for Nerd Flex.
Woohoo!
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. We're going to dive right into the test bank today. If you are here live and want to get a question out, type it in the chat. You know how this works, but we are running short on time. Mac, first question from the test bank is a special round.
Ooh, okay.
And this one says, name 2 video game doctors.
Okay, Dr. Mario.
Yeah, boom. That's the first one that I would have thought of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take it from you.
No, you're good. I wonder if we need to know the names of all of them, because I know several instances.
Professor Oak.
Is he a doctor?
Yeah, he's got a doctorate.
Not all professors are doctors.
Well, he has a doctorate. He also wears a lab coat. But okay, we can go to others.
Because I was going to say Professor Layton, but I don't know if he's a doctor.
Any video game that includes Sherlock Holmes has Watson. Dr. John Watson, he is a doctor.
Fair. Is there Dr. Spock video in the video games? A Star Trek video?
Spock. Well, I mean, I don't think he's a doctor. You mean Dr. McCoy? Yeah, in a Star Trek game, Dr. McCoy.
Yeah, we're stretching here.
Yeah. There's the doctor from Stardew Valley.
Yeah, the doctor's in The Last of Us.
Uh-huh.
What's her name's dad from The Last of Us 2 was a doctor. I forget her name. So Abby's dad. There's a lot more. I just can't think of them.
Harvey is the name of the doctor in Stardew Valley. Gosh, there's got to be so many more. But that's all I've got.
I'm interested to see which ones are listed here. That's more than 2, so we are good. Let's see. Oh, dude. The ones that you forgot are going to make you laugh. So Dr. Cortex, Dr. Wily,
Cortex, Dr. Wily, ow!
Dr. Light,
Dr. Light, ow!
And Dr. Zed. I don't know Dr. Zed.
Dr. Zed from the Isle of Dr. He's from Borderlands.
Oh, yeah. How could I have forgotten that? Well, dude, I literally click the random button and it goes to another special round. So here's the other special round.
Okay.
Name 2 characters that only appear in Star Wars video games, but not the movies or TV shows. This is hard.
Oh gosh, I think Dash Rendar and Kyle Katarn, or right? His name's Kyle Katarn.
This actually isn't hard because the modern Star Wars games. Oh my gosh, what is the protagonist's name? It's like Cade something, I think. The main, I can't remember. The guy from Jedi Survivor.
Gotcha. Shadows of the Empire had this guy named Dash Rendar, right? And as far as I'm aware, he only appears in the video games and in none of the other media. And Kyle Katarn, or something along those lines, is in one of the newer games. I don't know if he's in Jedi Survivors, but he's in one of the newer ones, and also is like, one of them apprentices of Darth Vader who goes good or something along those lines.
Well, let's keep it going. Ray Van, here's what it says in terms of the answers. Kyle Katarn, like you said,
nice.
and Cal Kestis. That's who I was trying to think.
Cal Kestis. Oh, I didn't even think of Revan, but yeah, Malik and Revan from Old Republic. Cool.
Well, last question of the day. Click the random button again. It's a Sonic question. What was unique about the cartridge for Sonic and Knuckles on the Mega Drive / Genesis? What was unique about the cartridge? I don't know.
Oh, you could plug another cartridge into it, man.
Really? And what would that do? What would be the...
Oh, that would just make it so that you could play Knuckles in the other games. You could use his, not just his sprite, but also like his moveset. It passed the game data through the cartridge and played the level data in the engine of the newer game.
I gotta get a Genesis, man.
Genesis
That's
does
amazing.
what Nintendo don't.
I flipped it, and it is correct, Mac. Previous Sonic carts could fit on top, and Knuckles could be used. Good. Well, we rushed through that, but that has been our Nerdflex for the week.
All right, well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I am not a lawyer. I just play one here on a podcast. Anyway, I've got an update for you on Stop Killing Games.
Ooh, tell us more.
As you know, more and more games require online connections in order to function. And that means that more and more games have and will continue to stop working the second a publisher decides to stop maintaining an online server. And while that seems like a pretty obvious thing for like a online head-to-head game like Fortnite, right? How do you even play that game without an online server? Or Counter-Strike, or MOBAs like League of Legends. It's also implemented in lots of single-player games, like Ghost Recon Breakpoint, for example. Or, up until very recently, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But as of 6 hours ago, they did say that they have patched the game so it will be playable offline. Fancy that. It is possible. So the all-wise online approach to video games is fairly universally disliked. Maybe we're old enough to remember that when Xbox announced that the Xbox One was going to require constant online connection to play the games, they had to backpedal so hard. Everybody else, Sony, everybody was taking shots at them, being like, "Here's how you share video games," and things like that.
Remember.
It was they were basically the laughingstock for a little while. But essentially, we're going down that road again. And last year, Ross Scott, who started the Stop Killing Games movement, StopKillingGames.com, with the hope to compile the best options for video gamers worldwide to do something about the practice of these games dying. There is a website that you can go to, StopKillingGames.com, select your country, and it'll outline what you can do to make your displeasure unknown, which, that might be saying something to the video game company, or most often it is legal actions or government petitions in this particular case. So when we had Ross Scott on to talk about it, the UK petition had to petition the government and say, hey, us customers, us consumers, think that what those game publishers doing might not be legal. Can you please do something about it? That petition was not live. Shortly after our interview with Ross Scott, it went live and made it through its first hurdle of signatures, but then was halted after only 3 weeks. It was supposed to have 6 months, but because there was a changeover in the government and some stuff, it basically went dark and stopped in its tracks until some administrative stuff got done. Anyway, the UK petition is now live once again. Last time it smashed through the 10,000 line because it's got a marker at 10,000 signatures and 100,000 signatures, which come with varying levels of responses by legislators. At 10,000 signatures, they're required to issue a response to the request. At 100,000 signatures, they're guaranteed to have actually parliamentary debate on it. And so anyway, it is back up. Help get it over the line. 100,000 signatures. It should be up for about 6 months. And when you look at the petition involved, it's not going to be perfect. Not least reason being is that you're limited to 900 characters, which I believe I have spoken more than 900 characters just since we started this segment in order to describe what you want, why you want it, and how the government is to hopefully participate. So you really have to focus up. So I encourage you to have a read over it. If we weren't already, going over time, I would probably read the 800 characters.
No,
just
you would
for
not.
fun.
No, you would not.
No,
you would not.
No, you don't want to hear the 800 characters, Mr. Nice Guy?
Oh, it's just 800 characters?
Yeah.
I do, but yeah, we are short on it.
Well, yeah. So in interest of time, that has been legalese. If you are a UK listener, go and sign that petition. Help let the dissatisfaction be known that you want to be able to play your video games, even after a publisher decides that they no longer want to hold down a server.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. This has been episode number 330 of Two Nerds in a Pod. Appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out. Before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that, the cool, nerdy stuff we've been into. Mac, what you been watching and playing, man?
So mostly, I've just been watching one show. It's my comfort food of television as of late, and that's Taskmaster. Lovely UK show, and quite fun. I encourage anybody to have a read over that. As for playing, though, Mr. Nice Guy, I've been playing just a couple of games. Some Skyrim. I'm making good progress. And also a game that I picked up in the winter sale and have been loving called Cyberhook.
Ooh, tell me more.
I am a sucker for a game with a grappling hook. It is a first-person perspective, very synthwave in music and styling, and you swing around these areas trying to get as quickly as you can to the exit. It's a very sort of digital past future type of vibe, but Cyberhook's really, really fun.
So do you like this style of game? Because there's another game, not necessarily using a hook, but where you're going through like a 3D world trying to beat your own time. Do you like that type of game?
I don't usually care too much for a game that you have to be really good at because I am bad at video games. So I don't care too much for a game that you have to be good at to like progress on to the next level. Or if you specifically have to beat times, I find that that's usually not very relaxing for me, and I do like to relax some when I'm playing. But in general, I think the vibe appeals to me from time to time. What's the one you were thinking about?
Well, the reason I ask is because I played Neon White a while. It's a good game. Like, if you watch the videos, you'll immediately know if you're going to like it or not, because it also required some shooting of enemies. And it was fun, but it was definitely like speed running.
Oh, and it's by Annapurna. These are the same guy. This is the same who did, or this is the same publisher, not the same developer, but it's the same publisher who did Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
Oh, well, if you like that, then you might like Neon White. And I played a lot of hours of it, so you should look into it. The trailer, like I said, will make it very clear if it's the type of game you'd enjoy or not.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, as far as what I've been watching and playing, I haven't really played a lot this past week, man. I think I mentioned last time I was still playing VVVVV, and that has been fun. Someone gifted that to me, as well as Ori and the Blind Forest, and just been watching the Marvel watch-through stuff. So Doctor Strange is where we are right now, and we've been enjoying that. So,
nice.
Mac, would you like to take us home, sir?
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into the show. It's been a delight to have you, and you can join us next week, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central. You'll catch us at twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod. That's with the number 2. And for those of you who are listening after the fact, thank you so much for listening. And remember, in some podcast platforms, they even let you leave a review for us. That would be helpful. But until we see you, hear you, or you hear us next time, Remember to be excellent to each other and keep it nerdy, y'all.
Deuces.
Bye.
See ya.